Welcome to Flowbee TV. Thank you for tuning in. This is a guitar I've made out of a bee box. I haven't put the bees in yet though. I'm yet to see what happens when I play this 6-string bass guitar with the bees in the bee box. So this morning we're going to be doing a live Q&A for kids. So if you're there as a parent, you're not allowed to ask questions yourself, but you can write them in the comments below for your kids. So if your kids have questions, ask them. Do they have questions about bees? And if so, put them in the comments below and we'll get to answering all of those questions. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is talk about some magic tricks. Now, bees have lots and lots of magic tricks. And the first one I'm going to show you is here with the magical bee smoker. So if you'd like to bring the smoker over, I'll show you what the smoker looks like. It's a very cool beekeeping thing. You puff it here and the smoke comes billowing out. But today, it's magic smoke. So watch this. Can you grab the smoker here for me, Jai? And what we're going to do is, could you start smoking my hands here? You can see there's nothing in my hands at all, nothing in my hands. Okay, thank you, that's good. And are you ready? That's enough smoke. They might think we're trying to disguise something. Oh, hello, there's something in my hand now. There we go. It's a magical beekeeping cloth used for wiping honey off your hands. Now I'm going to put that back in my hands and see if we can make it disappear. Everybody? Okay, we'll make that disappear. Shoving that back into my hand. Ready, steady, and boom. All gone. If you can work out how I did that trick, put it in the comments below. First one to discover how I did it, I'll send you a free Flow beekeeping hat. Okay, the next trick I'm going to show you is actually not a trick at all, but it kind of is a trick, because you used to have to do all of this hard work to get the honey out of a beehive. And my father and I came up with an invention that was so radically different that people thought we were tricking. For a long time, they thought we were tricking. So today's a live Q&A for kids. If you're just tuning in, if you've got questions, put it in the comments below. Questions from kids. Kids ask such fascinating questions. We want to hear those this morning. Put them in the comments below and we'll get to answering them. Meanwhile, I'm going to show you the next trick here. So I've got this little shelf and that just goes on that little position there, and this little shelf here. Now, you don't really need the shelf, but it's fun using the cover from here. This makes a beautiful little honey harvesting shelf that our jar can go right on top of here. Now we're going to take this little cap out and oopsie, and put a tube in here. Now if I take the top cover out and the top cap out, I'm now ready to show you this trick. So what I'm going to do is get this key here, put it into the hive and turn it. And what's happening inside the hive is the bees are standing on top of their wax honeycomb that they make, not even really aware that we're here, yet if this trick works, honey is going to come down this tube and into the jar. So let's have a see if we're going to get honey today. And it's looking good, because I'm getting hungry for some honey. Yum, yum, yummy honey coming out of the hive. It's like a magic trick, but it's actually not a magic trick, because it actually works. This is real honey and you can eat it. It's an amazing thing that is so magical. Okay, we've got questions rolling in. So my nephew here is going to ask the questions that you put in the comments below. So if you've got questions, put them in there and we'll get to answering those.
Cedar, our first question is, what do bees eat?
What do bees eat? Well, any guesses? Put it in the comments. What do bees eat? Have you got an answer for me? Let's have a look in the window, see if we can see any bees eating anything. Now, there's two things that bees eat. One of them is honey, no surprises there, and the other one is pollen. Pollen is also collected from flowers. The bees collect nectar from flowers to make honey, and they also collect pollen from flowers, but they don't actually eat pollen. They eat bee bread. They're amazing little chefs, and what they do is they get that pollen from the flowers, they take it back into the hive, they then mix it with some of their digestive juices and also a little bit of honey for good measure. Fermentation takes place like a lovely sourdough bread. So sourdough bread, we all know, if you're into healthy eating, sourdough bread is more healthy for you because the bacteria has partly digested those flour grains for you, and that makes it easier for you to digest. Bees do the same thing with pollen, and they create bee bread. We can't see any in the window here, but that's in the bottom box where all the babies are. There's these beautiful colours of pollen coming in from different flowers. They're fermenting it into their bee bread, and that's another thing that they eat, and it's especially useful for mixing up and feeding to their babies so they grow nice and strong. Great questions, keep them coming in. Look at this beautiful honey. I think I'm going to have a little taste. One lovely thing to do with honey is eat it, of course, but to eat it with different things. You can eat it on your breakfast, you can eat it on a mint leaf. So I'm going to put some honey on a mint leaf and see what it tastes like. Yum, yum, yum. That's better than any treats you get in any store, anywhere. Yum, yum.
Cedar, how do bees turn nectar into honey?
So bees are quite the workers. They work way harder than any of us do. First of all, a bee flies out to the flowers. So the flowers could be anywhere from just here to 10 kilometres away, and they can fly that far. They go and collect a little bit of nectar, and if they find some good flowers, they come back into the hive and they do a dance. And if you look in this window, you might see some bees dancing. And what that dance tells the other bees is exactly where to go to get the flowers, which is amazing. And off they go. The rest of the bees follow to where that good source of flower nectar is. They suck it all up. They can take like half their body weight in nectar. When they come flying back to the hive, they dribble that nectar down their tongue and start evaporating that by waggling their tongue in the air as they fly. When they get back into the hive, because the nectar is so runny, they need to reduce the water content, and they pass it to another bee who then puts it into a honeycomb cell. Then they splash it all around the cell walls, and they fan it and they dry it out, and they're trying to get it nice and thick, evaporating all the water away and get it into that yummy, nice, thick honey that we love to eat. Keep the questions coming in.
Cedar, is honey really bee vomit?
Is honey really bee vomit? Great question. So we were just talking about that. When the bee comes back into the hive, it passes the nectar from the flowers to another bee. And if we have a look at some of these pictures over here, my friend Hilary Kearney has made these beautiful pictures. Has also got a great book called Queen Spotting. Now you can see two bees here passing nectar from one to the other. They actually regurgitate it and pass it to the other bee. Now, you could say it's bee vomit, but you could also say it's not, because bees are clever and they have a honey stomach, which isn't actually their normal stomach. So they're not vomiting things up from their normal stomach. They have a special honey stomach that they regurgitate the nectar from. And if they get hungry on the way home, they actually have a little pipe from their honey stomach to their normal intestinal tract, and they tap off a little bit of that nectar to keep them going on the way home. It's pretty clever. Keep the questions coming in. For those that are just tuning in, we're doing a kids Q&A this morning. So if your kids have questions, put them in the comments below, or if you can already write the questions in the comments below and we'll get to answering those. Over here we've got honey coming out of the hive, and we've got a jar filling up here, which is a beautiful thing.
Cedar, how many days did it take to fill the cylinder you're now collecting from?
Okay, that's a good question. Yum. Honey and mint, beautiful. So bees can collect an incredible amount of nectar. A hive like this can visit 50 million flowers a day. Just take that in for a moment. 50 million flowers. It's actually ridiculous. And so when you've got really busy bees, a healthy colony with lots of bees like this in the window, lots of flowers out there that are heavy, dripping to the ground with nectar, the bees could fill up that frame again in a day. But sometimes there's no flowers because it hasn't rained, or perhaps the bush has burned in a bushfire, or perhaps your bees haven't built up and there's not enough bees yet to go and get the nectar. So sometimes they might take months to fill up that frame again. So it really just depends.
Jake's asking, actually Imogen's asking, why do you like bees?
Why do I like bees? Well, number one, they make lots of delicious honey, and I love honey. I love all types of honey. I like dark honey, I like light honey. So many different flavours come out of the beehive, and I love sharing that with all my friends when they come and visit. I also love bees because they do amazing pollination. As I was saying, this hive could visit 50 million flowers a day. There is no other insect on the planet that can do that. These honeybees are extraordinary, and they can go and pollinate flowers, and we all know that flowers need pollinating in order to make seeds and keep producing fruit and things that we like to eat. So if we didn't have bees, a third of the things on the supermarket shelf would disappear. So I love bees because they do their amazing work, and it gives us lots of food and keeps our whole system going that we all depend on. Great question. Keep the questions coming in.
Your nephew Heath is asking, where's the queen bee?
Hi Heath. Okay, that's a good question. This hive doesn't have an excluder, so she could be right here in the window. Let's see if you can spot a queen. Now, I'm looking in here and I actually can't see the queen. She's probably down laying babies in the bottom box because that's where she lays the babies. But there might be a drone. Here's a drone. Here's a big boy bee right here by my finger on the edge of the window. And you can see it's got nice big eyes compared to the other bees, and the bee beside it is doing a waggle dance, communicating with the other bees. They are such good dancers, they can tell whole stories about all sorts of things to the rest of the bees. But if you look over here on this picture, you can have a look at what a queen looks like. So here's the queen. And you'll notice that she is bigger. She's a lot bigger. This is the queen, and she's that big. She's not actually that big, this is a picture, but it's a lot bigger than this bee here. You can notice the wings come halfway down her body, whereas on this bee, they're all the way down her body. So she's got much longer abdomen, and she needs that long abdomen because she can lay lots and lots of eggs. So we didn't see the queen in the hive, but that is a nice picture. Thank you, Hillary. Okay, keep those questions coming in and we'll keep answering those. Okay.
Cedar, how do bees collect pollen?
Okay, bees, how do they collect pollen? Now, they actually have a magic trick. We were talking about magic tricks earlier, and bees have a technique. Imagine if you could walk up to your food, perhaps you went down to the shops, and before you even get to the food, it all jumps off the shelves and jumps in your pockets, and you're ready to go home. Well, bees can actually do that with their pollen. And I've got an example of just how that works. I'm going to need to borrow my daughter Mella. She's called Mella because Mella means honey in Latin. And Kylie is here too. So Mella is going to be my flower, and I'll just give you a demonstration of how this works. Is that okay, Mella? If I get this little balloon here, let's pretend this balloon is a bee. Doesn't have any stripes, but we could paint some stripes on it and some eyes on it. Pretend this is a flying bee. Now, the next thing we're going to have to do is get a static charge, because bees use static electricity to get their pollen to jump right off the flower onto their bodies. And you can make static electricity by rubbing a balloon on your arm, or better still, on your kid's head. So Mella's being my flower, and watch what happens when this bee comes close to the flower. Okay, the hair's jumping up to the balloon. Can you see that? The hair's jumping up to the balloon when it comes close. So that's pretty clever, and that's what the bees do. They charge themselves up with static electricity. When they come close to the flower, this is the flower, her hair is representing the pollen. All the pollen jumps off the flower onto the bee. The bees then scrape all of that pollen back to their pollen baskets, which they have on their hind legs. So if you see a bee with big yellow or perhaps some white, or there's all these different colours of pollen on their back legs, that's what they've been doing. They've been going out collecting pollen and using that static electricity trick to get it to jump onto their bodies. And then they can take it back into the hive and make their bee bread, which we were talking about earlier. It's very cool. Keep the questions coming in. Yum, yum. There's some honey down here, Mella. Mella does like eating honey. And I like eating honey too.
My boot.
Your boots are falling off. There we go.
We're just standing in the garden.
Standing in the garden. You're a wonderful flower today. Look at all your colours. Yum, yum.
What?
Stripy colours, rainbow colours.
Do the bees see colours?
That's a great question. Do the bees see colours? Now, the answer is yes, but they see it very differently to us. They have this infrared vision which allows them to really see the flowers. So we might look out and we might see some flowers, but the bees really see flowers. They see them in these kind of technicolor patterns, and they stand right out to them so they can just go straight there and find those flowers. So they use their sense of smell, they use their amazing vision, and they also use their static electricity. Now, when a bee has landed on a flower, the charge of the flower changes, and the bee knows that it's already been visited. So when this hive is visiting 50 million flowers in a day, it's really helpful to know which ones have been visited already and which ones haven't. So that's another trick they do, is the charge changes on the flower, and they go, hang on, somebody's already got the pollen and nectar from this flower. Yum, yum. Yum, yum, honey.
Cedar, Quentin's asking, why do the bees have stripes?
Why do the bees have stripes? Now, nobody's ever asked me that before, so thank you for a great question. And let me think about that for a moment. It's probably so they can tell who's a bee and who's not. So imagine if somebody came to the hive and they didn't have any stripes, you'd go, hang on, you're not a bee, you're a grasshopper. So that's probably the reason they've got stripes. If anybody's got a better reason, put it in the comments below and we'll get to answering those.
Why is the queen bee so much bigger than the other ones?
The queen bee is so much bigger, and if we go back to this bee picture over here, courtesy of Hilary Kearney, you can see that the queen bee is a lot bigger, and it's because in here is thousands and thousands of eggs. In fact, she can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day, and that's a busy mama. And there's only usually one queen bee in a hive. You can see some eggs in this picture here. They look like a little grain of rice in the bottom of a cell. Now, you can imagine that's a cell, and the cell is only as big as a bee, and that's a tiny, tiny little grain of rice in the bottom. Then the bees hatch out into what's called a grub or larva. And it's kind of like the caterpillar phase. They grow and they grow, and then they go through a cocoon phase. And inside their cocoon, these are all of their cocoons here, and that's called brood. Now, brood is the baby bees going through that process of changing from a grub into a bee, called metamorphosis. And then they chew their way out and emerge into the hive as a fluffy little new baby bee.
Does the queen have a crown?
The queen sort of has a crown. If you have a look at this picture here again, the queen kind of has a crown. If you have a look at the difference between this bee and this bee, there's this black shiny area on the back here, and that's helpful for when you're looking for a queen in the hive. You can look for that shiny backplate. The reason why it's shiny is because when all bees emerge, including the queen, it starts off furry like this. See how the bee's all furry? But the queen bee lives for so long that all the fur wears off, and there's this shiny area on her thorax here that is kind of like her crown.
How do the bees know which flowers to land on?
So the bees use their amazing vision to go and see flowers, but interestingly enough, I've been watching bees for a long time now, and some flowers they don't care for, and other flowers they just love to go and visit. So I don't think we understand everything about bees, but they know which ones they want to go and visit. And when flowers have lots of beautiful flowers but no nectar, we call it all show no flow. And for some reason the bees can tell that, they don't even bother going really for a look to those flowers. So the bees somehow can tell which flowers have pollen and nectar and which ones don't. And they use their amazing infrared vision and also their senses of smell. They're really good at smelling out a nice sweet nectar source.
What do bees drink?
Bees, well, bees do collect water. They get a lot of moisture out of collecting nectar. So you could say they drink nectar in a way, but they do collect water, but not really to drink. It's for another reason. Although they can mix water, if they've got some really dried out crystallized honey, they can mix water with it to then eat that mixture. But the main reason they collect water is to cool the hive. Bees are these amazing little air conditioners. They collect water, they fly back to the hive, and they use an evaporative cooling technique. I don't know if you've ever gotten nice and wet. Perhaps you've been in your swimsuit and then you stand out in the wind, you suddenly feel very cold. And that's because when moisture evaporates, there's a cooling effect, and bees use that cooling effect to cool down their hive and air condition it. The bees need to keep the hive at a specific temperature to keep the brood well. So the babies who are hatching in the bottom box, they need to keep it at just a little bit lower temperature than our body temperature. So the bees are trying to either keep it warm on cold days by disconnecting the wing muscles on their back and vibrating to create some heat. And that heat warms up the hive to that special temperature they need to make their babies survive. Now, if it's too hot, then they'll collect the water, fan it, cool down the hive. So extraordinary little insects, they can really get in there and climate control their whole house. Great questions.
Dash, 7 years old, asks, what do boy bees and girl bees do in the hive?
Dash, 7? No way, I was 7 when I was your age. So ask that question again.
What do boy bees and girl bees do in the hive?
Okay, boy bees and girl bees have different roles. Now, if you have a look in this window here, the girl bees do all of the work in the hive. They feed the babies, they make the wax, they make the honeycomb, they go and collect the nectar, they collect the pollen. They do all of the work in the hive. And boy bees have another job. Their job is to go and spread the genetics around of the hive. So they periodically fly out of the entrance and fly off to a drone congregation area. Boy bees are called drones. So the drones fly out to a drone congregation area, and they are hoping a queen bee will fly by so that they can mate, and that's how they spread the genetics of one hive to another hive and have their babies.
How many eyes do bees have?
So bees have a eye that's made up of thousands of tiny little pieces, like many insects do. If you look under a really strong microscope, there's all these tiny little hexagons that make up their eyes, and with those eyes they're able to do all of their amazing work, and they can actually see really quite well. In fact, they can recognize my face compared to yours. They can recognize one artist's work over another, and there's all these scientific experiments that have been done to show that bees can actually recognize one thing over another and remember it. They can remember for days, just like we can remember for days in our long-term memory. So we don't know how. They have tiny, tiny little brains, but somehow they're able to see and remember your face over somebody else's.
Why do bees have antennas?
Okay. So the antennae, if you have a look here, or there might be an example over here in this picture that's a bit easier to see. You can see the antennae here. So they use that. Imagine it's dark. It's dark in a beehive usually, except for we've opened the windows to let some light in, but usually it's dark. So the bees use their antennae for communication. And you'll see them coming up to each other, rubbing antennae, telling each other a little message and a story somehow, and doing a bit of a dance, and that's how they are able to pass on information inside the hive in that dark environment. It's quite amazing. We've got time for a couple more questions. If you've got more questions, keep putting them in the comments below, and we can keep writing back to you to answer your questions. Thank you so much for all of your questions today.
Why do bees sting?
So, bees sting to protect their gold. So, imagine if somebody was coming to get the gold from the back of your house. You'd probably want to sting them too. So bees, they collect all their nectar, they've gone through their very hard work, that's their food, and if you come up to try and take that honey, then they might want to sting you. Now, my dad and I invented a way where we can just harvest honey straight out of the back of the hive and they don't even notice we're here, which is a bit of a cool trick. But if you were going through the old method of trying to take the hive apart or come in through the entrance, then the bees are likely to want to sting you. And that's why beekeepers wear bee suits like this, and that's why they smoke the hive with a smoker to calm them down before taking the hive apart to do hive inspections or to harvest honey in a conventional way.
Why are bees important, and what is their impact on the world?
Okay, so bees are important for a number of reasons, and those reasons are, first of all, pollination. So there's more than 20,000 native bee species in the world, and we depend on those little pollinators to go and do their amazing work of pollination. As I was saying earlier, a hive like this could pollinate 50 million flowers a day. Flowers and bees have evolved with this symbiotic relationship where they need each other in order to make their fruit, make their seeds, and to also get their honey and get their nectar. So together, bees do their amazing work we call pollination, and that way the flowers can create their seeds, create their fruit, which we certainly love eating. So bees are amazing because they pollinate the all sorts of things, not only the ones that we want to eat, but a lot of these trees here, without bees and pollinators, they wouldn't actually be able to create their seeds. So without bees, without pollinators, the world would look very different. And so we really hope they stay around. The next thing is they collect an amazing amount of honey. Now, honey is a wonderful thing. It can be used for wound care. It's full of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients. It's amazing stuff for us. There's all sorts of different honeys come in, different colours, different flavours. Some are really medicinal, others just a beautiful flavour that we cherish and keep on the shelf and share with our friends. So I love that bees make honey, and that's one of the important things. But most of all, they do their amazing work of pollination and keep our whole food system going. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you've got more questions, put them in the comments below and we'll write back to you. And we'll be back next week on the day before this day, which is Wednesday our time, 10 AM, for more Q&As. And if you really like this, let us know and we'll do some more kids Q&As in the future. Thanks for watching.